All right, good afternoon. I like this whole idea I've been doing with not having an idea and freestyling, so I'm gonna go with that. So, where should I begin? Um, oh, I got it. There's something called a cheap trick or a cheap source. This is something that I was at one point, not too long ago. I'd say last year, up until last year, my whole life, there was one thing I was very good at, and that's called a cheap trick or finding a cheap source. Okay, a cheap trick is like, well, they have hat tricks in hockey. A hat trick is like, it's like a 1 in a 10 game thing, and the guy does something amazing with his stick and the puck, and it goes here, it goes there, and it scores. That's a hat trick, right? So a cheap trick is like, I'll tell you what a cheap trick is. A cheap trick is like finding, first of all, a cheap trick. Why was I so good at it? Because I was always at level 1. So I needed cheap tricks and cheap sources. Okay, cheap tricks are used at the most basic level, and it can be used at the most basic level against a more advanced opponent. So it can be an opponent that's grown much more than you, that's more far along than you, but you defeat them using a cheap trick. And that will also make you look like you're the shit in level 1, to the point that people will say, this guy is not a beginner. He's not a level 1 guy. He's not new at this. This guy is really fucking good. The reason is the ego, because you're playing in somebody who should totally dismantle you, should destroy you easily. I was very good at that. I mean, you name it, video games, life, classrooms, jobs, whatever it is. Cheap tricks was like my thing. I'll give you an example. So, I'll give you an example without giving away anything. Okay, how about that? You find out how to do the Hadouken. Okay, in Street Fighter, it's very easy to do a Hadouken, right? Now you shoot Hadoukens at the guy. What is he gonna do? If he blocks it, he's still taking a little bit of damage. So he might jump over it. He might jump at you. So you throw the Hadouken. If he jumps at you, you jump up in the air and you press that kick button, the strong kick, and you catch him with a kick. Now, don't get on my fucking case with this, because this is not one of my cheap tricks. Don't get on my case that, that you're talking about, this is not a real cheap trick in Street Fighter. Tell us a real cheap trick. No, go fuck. I'm not doing that, all right? This is just for like the sake of a metaphor or an example, but it's not an actual cheap trick, and nobody's gonna tell you they're a cheap trick. I'll tell you that right now. But you do that, for example, okay? That is your cheap trick, all right? Maybe you're playing FIFA and you find a glitch in the game where you have an angle or a spot where you can score from. Maybe it's an angle and a spot that hits the crossbar and goes in, and you're always finding that. The thing with cheap tricks and cheap sources is that they run out really fast. Cheap tricks run out really fast because you consecutively use them, you consecutively beat people who are more advanced than you, and eventually they realize what you're doing. Now you gotta find another cheap trick. Welcome to my fucking old life, my past life, okay? 30 fucking years of that. All right, welcome to that. All right, cheap source is, first of all, a cheap source is typically not the best quality. You're going with the lower source, but let's talk about it as level 1. As a level 1, a cheap source can be so good and effective that it's better than, let's say, higher levels of sources. Not the highest master level. I'm talking about like, if we had 100 or even 20, 15, 10, 15, 20, 30 levels, at level 5 or 6, you couldn't match the cheap source. Cheap source is like having a well that you know is going to run out, but it's really close to you and it's angled and it's shaped perfectly so that taking water out of it is not only so easy, but the water is nice and cool because it's dark. It could even be spring water. So I know that in some countries, I don't know, in winter-like countries, I don't know which ones, but I do know that they have hot springs, right? And you can dig a hole and you can actually take water out of there and you can make coffee from it. Okay, don't quote me on that. But you can literally dip into a hot spring, take water, put your instant coffee in there, and you got coffee, right? So we have like hot springs, by the way. Sorry, not even hot. There's cold springs too, but they're natural water. You gotta dig a hole and you gotta. That's not a real well. Real wells are typically like different. Like, I'm talking about I'm talking about first of all quality spring water. Okay. If it was typically wells have shitty water, so you're not getting any good water from there. I'm talking about like a nice spring water source, and not your Aquafina crap. You know, or your no name crap. I'm talking about like Fiji water level, not Fiji water, but Fiji water level. Going right into the spring, filling up that bucket, or literally reaching the spring with your arms and pulling that water out. Now you're gonna keep going back to that spring. I guarantee you that spring, right? Because springs don't last that long. If it's a small spring, it might last you like 6 months, 3 to 6 months. Okay, that's a cheap source. It's close to you. It's easy to take. You can drive there. Doesn't cost much. But here's the problem with cheap sources. People will find out, okay? They will find out that you have a cheap source. You might be able to keep it secret for a while. If you're the first person there, obviously you can keep it a secret for 10 years, 20 years. But at some point, somebody's gonna find out. Now, if it gets out into the, like everybody in your city knows, that water is gonna run out really fast. So what are they gonna do? They know that spot is hot now. They know that's a hot spot. What are they gonna? They're probably just gonna dump all their water in there, and trick people. And people think they're or they're gonna dig up another spring nearby and be like, "Hey, this is the same spring." And people have become so reliant on it, you know, that I got to keep going to that spot to get it. And it's also being fought over. So some people get it, and some people are not getting it. That's the deal with that. So I explained cheap tricks, and I explained cheap sources. Now, at this point in my life, I know that if at level 1, I was beating people who were way more advanced than me, way more grown than me, then what am I gonna do now that I'm growing and I'm probably at that level right now, or if not higher? Let's be fair though, it's only been 3 months. You know what I mean? It's not like in 3 months I'm gonna become a university professor or something. You know what I mean? It doesn't happen in 3 months. Even if I'm really going fast, you know, it takes a little bit more time. But I'll tell you, in 3 months, I'm probably grown enough to do that. So I could probably take on people who are much more grown than me, knowing that I did that at level 1. Fair enough, or what? I think that was a really great video. I don't want to overdo it and keep it too long and bore anyone. So I'm gonna wrap it up here. Say good afternoon again, and this is it.